Hello, my name is David Mahalik. I'm an engineer here at Fort Defiance Industries. We are talking about the P2131 sterilizer, and in this video we're going to talk about the alarm section in your technical manual. So in the alarm section in your technical manual, there's 23 different alarms that the sterilizer can have during operation. So as you can see in some of the operational videos, whenever you get an alarm, it comes up on the screen. You can press reset to reset the alarm. And a lot of those alarms can be handled by the operators, but a lot of these alarms, they're going to call you, the maintenance technician, to come in and troubleshoot and fix. So what we're going to try to do in this video is to try to give you some tips on troubleshooting. What do these alarms mean? What is going on with the sterilizer when these 1 through 23 alarms come up? So I'm not going to necessarily tell you what to check. You can reference your technical manual in the alarm section. For each alarm, it kind of explains what's going on in, some top 2 to 3 things that you can check and fix to fix these alarms. So we're just going to march through them. Number 1, cycle aborted. This is more for the operators, but if they ever press abort in a cycle on the PLC, you'll get an 01 cycle aborted alarm. And they can just press reset, cycle the door, and they'll be ready for future cycles. 02 is a low water level alarm. So the liquid level switch in the back that is attached to the jacket, if water ever gets below that certain point, you're going to throw this alarm, and that, again, like we said, that's to protect the heaters. So if the water level ever gets too low, that alarm is going to go off and it's going to turn off the heaters so they don't burn up. That's a very important alarm to get when you first set up this unit. So the first time you set up P2131 sterilizer, if you haven't added water, you should get that 02 low water level alarm, which is a good sign because you know that that switch is operating correctly. So it's kind of a good check for the operators, but if they ever have questions for you, the maintenance personnel, that's what the 02 low water level alarm is. 03 is a jacket warm-up slow alarm. So what that is we first fire this up in the morning. There is these watchdog timers, and this is for most of the alarms, but there's timers that are run in this PLC that are constantly checking to make sure everything is taking a normal amount of time. So for the jacket warm-up slow, the jacket is where the water is boiling and heating up. It's where the heaters are, kind of in a gap around the chamber. If that's taking more time than normal, you will get a jacket warm-up slow 03 alarm. So, there's a few things you can check for that. A lot of times you'll have your jacket vent valve open, so steam can't build pressure. It'll take a long time to warm up. There's a few other things you can check, which you can reference your manual. The 04 alarm is the long heat up. So a little different than the jacket warm-up slow. The long heat up alarm is actually for during cycles. After you go through your conditioning phase, your pressure pulses, your vacuum pulses, you will get to the heat up, where you switch to temperature control, and you're controlling off of temperature in the RTD probe down here in the drain. When you switch to temperature control, that heat up to 273 degrees should take a pretty standard amount of time. And again, there's a watchdog timer. If that's taking longer than normal, you will get a long heat up 04 alarm. And so, again, reference your technical manual. Sometimes, the steam trap may not be operating correctly. There could be a steam leak that's not allowing the sterilizer to pressure up and heat up. So you may get that long heat up alarm. So number 5 is long exposure time. This alarm is when you're in a cycle and you're in exposure, there's a certain amount of time that should take. Whenever the sterilizer is stabilizing and trying to find its set point of 273 degrees, or 274 for the BOWIE dick, if it can't find that in a certain amount of time that dips below, it'll go back into stabilization. If it does this a few times, the exposure is going to take longer than normal. And again, there's a watchdog timer that says it should take this amount of time to get through exposure. If it's taking longer, we're going to throw this alarm, this 05 long exposure time alarm, because the PLC knows that it's not behaving normally. And if this exposure time's taking longer than normal, the system may not be controlling well. So if it's constantly dipping below the set point, 273 degrees, you'll know that possibly the RTD probe is malfunctioning. Possibly the RTD transmitters are malfunctioning. So if the temperature equipment is not behaving normally and allowing it to find that set point, 273 degrees, you may get this long exposure time alarm. Number 6 is insufficient vacuum. So this is for the conditioning phase. During the conditioning phase, when we are pulling our 3 vacuums, the first one's 10 inches of mercury, then 14, then 18. If it can't get to those set points within a certain amount of time, again, it's a timer watching it. It gives the sterilizer a certain amount of time to get to those set points of 10, 14, and 18. And if it can't get there in a certain amount of time, the PLC will throw this insufficient vacuum alarm. So you could have some problems with your water recovery system. The adapter that pulls the vacuum could be clogged. Maybe your vacuum hose is clogged. There's a lot of things you can check in your manual. But what's going on there is somehow the vacuum is not being pulled in the correct amount of time. The water recovery system, the water can also heat up. As that water heats up and gets really hot, vacuum performance does decline a little bit. Shouldn't be to the point where you throw this alarm, but if you're running a really hot environment, you may have insufficient vacuum 06 alarm. Number 7 is the chamber pressure high. This one, since the chamber is connected to the jacket, we're going to reference you to jacket pressure high 09. Anytime the chamber would be over pressure, it'd be caused by the jacket being over pressured, since the steam in the jacket enters into the chamber. There is the chamber pressure sensor on top though that's reading that pressure. And so if it happened to malfunction and maybe spiked in its pressure output reading to the PLC, you could get this alarm. So you have your chamber pressure transmitter here on top that could malfunction. Very durable, should last a very long time, but if that got bumped, maybe damaged during transport, you could potentially get a chamber pressure high alarm 07. Number 8 is chamber pressure low. So it could be caused by the pressure transmitter, but more than likely something else is going on. If during a cycle, if during any time during a cycle, you could get this alarm. But what could cause it is possibly a steam leak. If the chamber cannot pressure up in time, you're going to get this alarm. So you could have one of your manual vents open. You maybe didn't tighten your door all the way. A couple different reasons. Reference your manual for all the things you can check. But the 08 chamber pressure low, again, if the chamber pressure transmitter on top reads that the value is too low, you'll get this alarm. So 09 jacket pressure high. So just like we have a chamber pressure transmitter, we have a jacket pressure transmitter that's measuring the pressure of the steam and water in the gap around the chamber. And if that gets too high, to protect the user, the whole system, it'll shut everything down. So if that jacket pressure gets high, same thing with the chamber pressure gets high, it'll close all the valves, turn off the heaters, and it'll just sit there. You can just turn it off. We want to shut everything down and not try to open valves and vent and fix things, because just to protect the user, to shut everything down, that'll protect you. So 09 jacket pressure high. Again, the pressure transmitter that's measuring the pressure, it could spike, it could have gotten damaged, causing that alarm. But also, you could have some temperature control issues there. Since temperature and pressure are supposed to be proportional, if, say, the pressure, when it was controlling off of temperature, if they're not proportional, you could have a really high jacket pressure and a lower temperature, so you could potentially get this 09 jacket pressure high. Number 10 is a long vent time. So at the end of cycles, when the chamber is venting, if say the vent was clogged, the HEPA filter was clogged, if the vacuum brake valves were not opening sufficiently, it could take a lot longer than normal to vent the chamber. And if it takes longer than normal, there's a watchdog timer kind of checking on the vent time, and it knows it should take a certain amount of time. If it takes longer than that, you'll get this long vent time. So could have clogged HEPA filter, could have, if you're sitting at idle and you're not in a cycle and you press vent, if you don't tighten the door, you can also get this long vent time, because in order for it to vent, it has to pull a slight vacuum, and it can't pull a vacuum if this door is not tight. Number 11 is long dry time. So for the long dry time, you have to get, in order for things to dry, the water recovery system pulls a vacuum on the sterilizer, and there's a set point where it has to pull at least, say, 10 inches of mercury. And that allows all that condensation to flash off. So when there's a vacuum, it allows the contents inside the chamber to dry. So if you didn't have a deep enough vacuum, then that watchdog timer would know that you're really not drying sufficiently. And if you don't hit that set point of vacuum for a long enough period of time, you'll get this long dry time, number 11. Number 12 is vacuum test fail. The only time you'll get this alarm is if you've been running a vacuum leak test. So if you're on the main menu and you're going to test and running a vacuum leak test, we have a video on vacuum leak test, but for that test, it's a 15-minute test. After the chamber stabilizes, the PLC records the value of vacuum in the chamber, waits for 15 minutes. If any leaks occur, it's going to let some air in, it's going to lose vacuum, and the final value is going to be a lower vacuum than the first value at the start of 15 minutes. If that happens, you're going to fail your vacuum leak test, and you'll get a number 12 alarm. And there is a troubleshooting guide in the back of the manual to help you find that vacuum leak. Number 13 and 14 they're kind of related, fuse inputs and fuse outputs. We have some fuses in the electrical enclosure to protect all the electronics. PLC is constantly monitoring those. If those blow, you'll get one of these alarms telling you that one of those fuses is blown. Number 15 is door opened. So if I ever tried to open this door during a cycle, or when it's venting, it could be at the end of the cycle, if I tried to open it too early, I will get a 15 door open alarm. Also though, if you're getting it and you know you're not doing anything wrong, the door switch sensor could be out of alignment, out of calibration, and there's a procedure in the back of the manual to recalibrate your door switch sensor. So if your operator is saying, I'm not opening the door early, but I'm still getting this door open alarm, then your door switch sensor is possibly out of alignment, and so you can reprogram that to get rid of that alarm from reoccurring. Number 16 is chamber high temperature. This is kind of just an upper limit, an upper safety limit. There's also another alarm that we'll talk about here in a second, high exposure temperature. Both of these are coming off the temperature probe and the transmitters measuring the temperature in the chamber, but this is kind of an upper limit. If during a cycle, if during the operation of this sterilizer, if the temperature gets over the certain limit, just to protect, say, the instruments inside that you're putting inside there, protect the system, you'll get this alarm. So typically you will get that high exposure temperature alarm before this, but if you're not in exposure, if you're in a different part of the cycle, you may get 16 chamber high temperature. Number 17 is chamber sensor. So the reason it's chamber sensor, it's not temperature or pressure specific. Since temperature and pressure are directly proportional, as temperature rises, pressure rises, if there's a big enough difference between the two, you'll get 17 chamber sensor alarm. So if the steam and the temperature in the chamber is, say, 273 degrees, the PLC knows approximately what pressure the chamber should be at. If it was, say, way low, PLC would know something's off and that pressure and temperature are not proportional, and it would throw 17 chamber sensor alarm. So you would know there's possibly some problems with your temperature measurement equipment, possibly your chamber pressure sensor. Either one of the sensors, if they're not kind of working together, you'll know one of those sensors is malfunctioning. 18 is processor error. So this PLC right here, during operation, during first startup, all the code, all the zeros and ones, all the code that was written, it tallies up all those numbers into a checksum number. And that checksum is stored in the PLC, and it knows what, so if I have the original version of the program here, it knows what that checksum number should be. If any corruption had to happen to the program, that checksum number would change. If one little thing changes in the code, those ones and zeros will not add up to the same checksum number. If those numbers are different, you'll get this alarm, and you'll know that the program is corrupted. So the PLC is constantly checking if anything happened, during transport, the PLC was damaged. You could corrupt the program, and you will get an 18 processor error alarm. A lot of times you can give us a call, you can reload the program. There's a few things you can do to get rid of that alarm. You can email us at techsupport@fortdefianceIND.com. Probably going to want to give us a call so we can help you out with this alarm. So number 19 is exposure timer, and number 20 is dry timer. Both of these, again, there's watchdog timers that's saying the exposure should take this amount of time and the dry should take this amount of time within a little bit of a cushion. If either one of those is out of tolerance, there's a battery in this PLC that operates the real-time clock. If the real-time clock is going slower than normal, you could get these alarms. So that battery is supposed to last 5 years. If it lasts, if it's kind of running out, kind of running sluggishly, you may get one of these alarms, 19 or 20, and you'll know that the real-time clock is not as accurate as it once was. So you'll have to follow the battery replacement procedure that's in the back of the manual. So number 21 is temperature sensor. So the temperature sensor down here has two elements in the end, two RTD elements. And the RTD elements is a resistance temperature device. So as the temperature goes up, the heat goes up, the resistance grows, and the PLC knows that the temperature is going up. So it kind of relates the resistance to temperature. But there's two because off of one, the sterilizer is controlling itself. So when it's in exposure and it's controlling off the temperature and it's hitting the set point of 273 degrees, it's controlling off of element 1 of the probe. Element 2 is checking up on 1. So during exposure, to ensure that the chamber is indeed at 273 degrees, the set point, number 2 is also reading the temperature, saying, am I at 273 degrees? Am I low? Am I high? There's a little bit of a cushion. If they're off for a minute, you'll get this alarm. So they can be off for a little bit, because thermal expansion, traction, there's a bunch of different things. They can be off by, say, a degree for a little bit amount of time, but if they're off for a minute or longer, they'll get this alarm because the PLC will know Element 2 is not agreeing with element 1. This chamber is really not at 273 degrees like we said it is, so you'll throw this alarm. So you're going to obviously want to check the probe, possibly transmitter problems in the electrical enclosure, possibly wiring problems too. The wiring under this orange insulation can be damaged. Number 22 is the high exposure temperature. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a 16 chamber high temperature. This high exposure temperature only applies during the exposure of the cycles. So there's a limit for 270 degree sterilizers. That cycle can run anywhere from 270 to 276. So we run right in the middle at 273. If you ever get over 276 during exposure, to protect the instruments, you're going to throw this alarm. If you ever get below 270, you're going to have another alarm. But if you ever get above 276, you're going to have a high exposure temperature alarm. This can be caused by the probes. If the probes were damaged, wires are damaged, you know, if you mess with these wires and that resistance spikes, PLC will think temperature spikes, and it would throw that alarm. Anytime it gets over 276, it will throw the alarm. During a BOWIE DIC test, that band is a little smaller. It controls at 274 degrees, and its band is plus or minus 1.5 degrees. So if you ever go above 275.5 for a BOWIE DIC test, you'll get the high exposure temperature alarm. Again, your first culprits there are going to be your probe and your transmitters. So number 23, the last alarm, is the jacket sensor alarm. And this alarm is just for if it loses signal, because we've already covered the jacket high pressure alarm. But if the PLC notices that the jacket sensor is no longer outputting a signal, say the cable got damaged, the transmitter got damaged during transport, if the PLC is not receiving a signal from the jacket pressure transmitter, then it can't control at its 28.5 psi idle, and so it'll throw this alarm so that it doesn't overpressure with the heaters. So very important alarm when you're just sitting at idle, the number 23 jacket sensor. So that's all the alarms. If you have any questions on these, you can call us, you can email us at techsupport@fortdefianceind.com. We'd love to talk with you and work through these alarms. Some of them can be difficult to troubleshoot, but again, always reference your technical manual on your first line of things you can check to address these alarms.